Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have with me the president of the Coalition of Hindus of North America, Nikunj Trivedi, to talk about the California State University system adding caste to their anti-discrimination policy. How did this happen, and that too so quickly, under the radar, and what are the ramifications of this? There's a lot of ramifications, by the way, a lot of uproars going on to get to the bottom of it and how things are going to play out in the coming few weeks and months. Let us invite Nikunj Trivedi ji. Nikunj ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaste, always a pleasure to be here.
So Nikunj ji, I was just reading somewhere that there is a resolution, making the rounds in CSU, keeping in mind that CalState University is perhaps the largest university system in California with 23 campuses and 8 offline, or what I call as long distance learning campuses. It's a huge body. And then suddenly, caste is being added into their anti-discrimination policy. Many of the faculty are now aghast because when we come and apply, there's no such a thing as what caste do you belong to. And this doesn't make sense that when there are so many other places, like the county of Santa Clara, where this thing was discussed, and they realized that this is way too complex for somebody to come in and weigh on it. Now, why is the CSU acting in such haste? What are your thoughts? What do you think is really happening? Can you take us through this, please?
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me. What's really important to keep in mind is, let me walk back from where it started, the genesis of this whole thing. So when you look at early in 2021, I think around February or so, the Association of Students, like there's a Senate essentially at the university, Student Senate. The Student Senate passed a resolution that was talking about including caste discrimination within the university policy. So that's where it first started. Okay, and there were a bunch of students who were working on this in the background. Some names have come out in the media, but there are other people who are working in the background. And what they did was they created a resolution that blamed Hinduism for caste-based discrimination directly. There is no other religion being mentioned in there. Okay, it's very clearly mentioning Hinduism because they talk about Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras as if those are 4 castes. So they have, right from the bat, right, they have misinterpreted Hinduism. They have tried to define what Hinduism really is along caste lines, and then said, well, this religion, that's where the genesis of this caste issue has been. And then they tie that to how blacks are discriminated and how the whole idea of white supremacy and caste supremacy are connected. Then they talk about the Equality Lab survey, right? This one survey since 2016 to 2018 has been the only source that has been touted across the media, across everywhere. And that itself is based on a lot of false evidence and also sort of misinformation. And we know that we've talked about this before, how the Carnegie Endowment actually said that this survey is completely unreliable. So when you package all that stuff, the student body passed a resolution recommending that caste be added. From that point onwards...
One question, sir. One question. While this resolution was being passed, was this thing debated? Were there people pro and con saying that this should be brought in and this shouldn't be brought in? Were the student body, who may have had a different opinion, allowed to air their views? What do you think went down?
So there was a kind of a quote-unquote hearing when this resolution was being evaluated. But I think based on, if you look at the backgrounds of some of the students behind it or the people behind it, the ink was already cast. They already wanted that this resolution be passed. So the public, the quote unquote hearing of people was just a show. And ultimately they decided that it doesn't matter what others say, we're just going to go ahead. So there's this urge, this itch of doing some social justice good work and trying to pass these resolutions by showing that we're actually trying to help the disadvantaged people. By thinking like that, they're actually hurting an entire community. Right, so that's where around February of earlier 2021, this entire thing started at CalState. Of course, there are things that may have happened before, but from that point onwards, there was a group of people who started to working on this, and then they started to make presentations to the university departments and things like that. And there are certain departments who are adamant that no matter what happens, as part of their work around racial justice and social justice, etc., they want to add caste as a category of, again, in the anti-discrimination policy. But again, we'll talk about why that's a problem in general. But this is the genesis of how this whole thing came about. And then there's a there's a group. Once the resolution is sort of like introduced, then there's also a group of trustees that votes on it, right? So that vote happened just earlier this week, and there was a whole bunch of people who actually were from both sides on the hearing, but unfortunately the Hindu side, or the people who were against it, was not given a good platform. Some people did not get a chance to speak, while the other side had their prominent activists. Whether you talk about the head of the Tenmori Sundararajan, head of Equality Labs, or even Professor Audrey Truschke weighed in, right? She was presenting. There were all these different people, so the so-called scholars, or the so-called activists presented. But from the Hindu side, many of them did not get a chance to speak. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that even before the trustees voted on it, right, the news media already called it a win. So they already preempted it. So if you look at the vote was this week, right? But a few days before the vote, they already had declared victory. So now you have this media blitz that is saying that, hey, CalState University system passes resolution on caste and this and that all over the world, all over media. So the trustees were basically like, oh, well, okay, well, this is already done. So this is already forcing their hand in many ways. Not that I'm saying that they were going to change their mind, but at least this is actually as if like it was already proven before it was actually passed. So there's a lot of this thing going on. So this is where we stand as far as the actual policy and stuff is concerned. And we'll talk about the impact of that on students. And you mentioned about the faculty too. So
the whole thing started because a small group of students felt that this needs to be brought in as a factor in anti-discrimination policies of the university. Before we continue further, I just want to clarify one thing for all our viewers. California State has perhaps one of the most lowest fees in terms of like how much a student pays when he goes through college there, he or she goes through college. And California system, and for that most of the public university system in the United States, looks at the affordability of the parents to put their child through the college process. And there are also need-based aids available. And there are also options where the students can go in and take low interest loans and so on and so forth. But when you are enrolling into CalState system, there are many famous California State universities such as San Jose State or San Diego State. These are all part of this. They already, the fees are very low. So what was the reason to include caste? Because it is not like, it's not a Harvard education. This is a very affordable university, but yet they wanted to do this thing. What exactly was intended? I mean, somebody is going to lose out in this, isn't it, Nikunj?
Absolutely. And it's going to be the Hindu community, ultimately. No matter what they say, oh, this is not meant for a particular religion. The fact that you have based it on two things. Number one, based it on a survey from a group that openly hates Hindus. This never happens in any other religion. I can tell you, if there was a group that was spreading Islamophobia or a group that was spreading anti-Semitism, and they were the ones who were advancing policies against the Muslim community or the Jewish community or any other community, they would not be able to come this far. But only when it comes to Hindus, because Hindus are expendable and Hindus never say anything. We just kind of go scared. We get bullied very, very easily. It's like that nerdy kid, the stereotype of that nerdy Hindu kid who gets pushed around getting veggies and basically on their pants and stuff like that. That's how it's right now. Hindus are being bullied and we're not fighting back, unfortunately. So they said, hey, you know what? This will go. So no other religious community has been subject to such kind of double standards. So that's number one. Number two is, it doesn't matter about it's nothing to do. So we're thinking about what's going on in India. It has nothing to do with cheap education, any of that stuff. It has to do with propaganda. Okay. They are basically trying to show that Hindus, the upper caste, the so-called upper castes, are all casteist. So pretty much every faculty member, every student, majority of the students are really casteist. And this policy is aimed to protect a non-existent group of people who are being discriminated, right? When I said non-existent group, doesn't mean that people who are so-called Dalits or etc. don't exist. What I'm trying to say is they're trying to create a problem where there is not enough data. If there was systemic discrimination against Dalits or systemic discrimination against the so-called lower castes, where is the darn data? Where is the damn data? Show us the damn data. Number one. Number two is you are relying on one survey that has been proven again and again that is factually inaccurate. For me, that's propaganda, right? You're not, and third thing is you're not done your due diligence. Nobody has done any due diligence. Like if you are going to be a university, you have research departments, you have people who are academic, who have academic integrity. They have sacrificed their academic integrity by failing to do due diligence. If you're going to pass a resolution or if you're going to pass a policy that's going to impact thousands of people, faculty, students, administrators, etc., don't you think you have to spend some time doing due diligence? That you have one person, one organization coming to you and saying, this is a problem. What about your own researchers? Did they go out and do the field researches? Did they take opinions or input from the people who are going to be impacted by this? So example, did they take opinions from Hindu students or other non-Hindu students? Did they take opinions from faculty members, right? Because the policy is going to impact how the faculty members are employed, right? And now finally, apart from due diligence, how the heck are they planning to administer this? How do you know whose caste is what? Do you know the caste by last name? Do you know the caste by the person born? What is it? Because that person is a vegetarian? Because the person is this way or that way? How do you know that caste, right? And that is the biggest issue. The failure to do the due diligence and the fact that they have no damn clue how they're going to administer this policy. Who's going to be responsible? Is Equality Labs going to be responsible to come up with a roster of like 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 castes? And somebody has to sit there and say, well, okay, wait a minute. You said you belong to this caste, you belong to that caste. How did you discriminate?
Well, Equality Labs cannot be part of any of this, in my opinion, because if they are basing all this on a survey that they did, and then they come in and start administering this, wherever it is, it constitutes, in my opinion, a conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's a conflict of interest for sure, but that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to have people who are affiliated with those types of organizations coming in and telling the universities, okay, let me show you. First of all, there are two pieces. Number one is let me actually train you. The big one is the training part. So what they want to do is they want to train they want to train faculty administrators, they want to train university administrators, they want to train professors on what they're calling like anti-caste discrimination or whatever, anti-caste training and things like that. That has been very clear. That's one of their big objectives. They want to make sure. So they want to act as the subject matter experts in how caste is talked about in the United States. Okay. And so by doing that, they also, of course, want to, influence more and more. So they want to become the subject matter expert at the expense of the Hindu students and faculty that are on campus. Okay. The second thing is that, like you said, the organization is also trying to say, well, let me tell you what caste is. Okay. So the roster, when you compare gender, race, etc., they're very key markers, right? Someone is a male, a female, non-binary, or binary, whatever you want to call them, different types of gender-based identifiers. You can identify those. But when you look at caste, okay, yes, some people's last names may tell you what they're from, but other people's last names won't. For example, one of the Dalit activists, her name is Yachika Dutt. Okay, now Dutt is a Bengali last name that you can find amongst Brahmins also, right? So you cannot say that now because of one last name you can do this, right? So similarly, in the southern part of India, you have for a father's first name, it becomes your last name. So how do you determine what that person's caste is? Or if you come to Gujarat, or if you go to the northern part, you have last names like Patel, Parmars, Kumars, right? These are very generic last names. You cannot tell the actual caste unless and until there are a lot more things you take into consideration. Do you think a university administrator is going to sit there and understand the Indian dynamics or the Pakistani dynamics, etc., behind, oh, what is this? Let me see what Patel really is, right? Who's going to determine that? And the answer is they want organizations like Equality Labs and stuff to adjudicate on this matter because the universities have no damn clue. As we saw in Santa Clara, as you pointed earlier, the reason Santa Clara did not pass was because of the fact that the supervisors realized that this is a futile exercise and they're going to go through an administrative nightmare to to administer whose caste is what and why. So it's a silly exercise. They realize that. Unfortunately, just to finish my point, unfortunately, there's a big undercurrent of this itch to do something about social justice and racial justice for many good reasons. But the target is wrong.
Now, the student signatories to this resolution in the CalState system, they should have at least experienced this.
Yeah.
And what was the basis on which they said that, yes, I belong to XYZ and that I have been discriminated, thus 1, 2, 3. What was the body of evidence? Do you have any idea on this, Nikunj?
There is none. They have never produced it. Okay. And you cannot say a public university will say, well, we're going to pass a policy and we're not going to share data with you, because under the Freedom of Information Act, they will have to share data. It's a public university with taxpayer money. They have never shared any data. Let's say, for example, one student faced caste discrimination of some sort. That's not even proven today, because can we find filings? Can the university produce filings that says that some student complained against a faculty or another student or something on the fact that he or she was discriminated in caste anonymously? They don't have to share names. And then the result of that investigation showed that there was actual caste discrimination. None of that exists today. It's all talk.
I also have seen in various demonstrations, people who don't even belong to Hindu community, like they don't say they are Hindus, are protesting against the caste in Hinduism. How can they justify this? I mean, don't people even do some basic checking? For example, equality labs. This one person, everywhere you see the same Tenmori Soundararajan come. By the way, that is exactly what you said, that the father's name becomes the person's last name. Has anybody asked her, what is her knowledge about caste system? A, when did she experience it? B, and what is her current religion? I'm willing to bet it is not Hindu.
Right. So there are two answers to this. Number one is, so I'll work backwards. They have no clue about the caste system, as far as they're not scholars on it, because what they're doing is they're taking the current narrative that is very anti-Hindu. In fact, they actually tweeted out when Parag Agrawal became the CEO of Twitter. You've probably seen this on Twitter.
Yes,
they tweeted out that he was a Brahmin.
This in the last hangout.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's not a Brahmin, right? So just that basic knowledge about who is what and what is missing. Number one. Number two is, as you mentioned, see, some of these folks have a. I mean, if you have kids in colleges and stuff, they will tell you that I don't have to be black to protest against racism. I don't have to be Muslim to protest against Islamophobia, etc. That's really important, and that's understandable, because we all support allyship and things like that. But in this particular situation, it's not black and white. No pun intended in that sense. It's not black and white. It's extremely gray and extremely inaccurate, because you can really jeopardize someone's identity by saying that this person was, are there people who have belonged to certain very specific castes and things like that? Yes, you can figure that out. But the university has no business in that, and university will not be able to do this as a matter of fact policy. It's all philosophical discussions. You can have academics talking about, the 4 castes, which is also inaccurate in general. And there's a plethora of evidence for the last 50 years plus that has already shown how the colonial project, the colonization of Hindus or the India itself, produced the caste system as we know today. That doesn't mean that social discrimination did not exist, but the caste system as we know today has been a project of the colonial empires, right? So that piece is never discussed. And scholars who have discussed this, right? There's many of them. There is Nicholas Dirks, Ronald Inden, and these are all American scholars, not some Hindutva or caste supremacists. These are all American scholars who have done a great job explaining this. However, they have been ostracized, they have been silenced, they have not been given a platform. Only the ones that keep peddling this narrative that, there are 4 castes, they come from the 4 parts of the Rigvedic Purusha who was done this, and that's therefore the hierarchy. It's always that narrative that is pushed. And whether it's Equality Labs, whether it's some of the other groups who are working on this, they keep supporting this narrative because that's what sticks, right? But the Hindu community never pushes back. We go back into our holes, and I want to talk about the impact on students. Okay, so we had some students reach out to us, and this is very important for people to understand. If you are a parent, if you have a kid who's going to high school, and if you have a kid who's in college, I want you to understand this. So some students reached out to us, and they came to us and said, we are really concerned about it. And let me show, if you are parents and if you are people who have kids who are in college or no kids in college, I want you to understand this. When they go to campuses, they join different groups. So in this particular situation, if they join a Hindu group, they may be considered casteist. Okay, if they decide to celebrate Diwali and Holi, according to some of these groups, Diwali and Holi are casteist Hindu festivals, and therefore they will be labeled casteist. If they want to cater vegetarian food, okay, and somebody decides to say, hey, I'm not a vegetarian and my food or my lifestyle is being excluded from the Diwali celebrations and things like that, therefore you are casteist. Celebrating Diwali, ordering vegetarian food, even dressing up certain clothes. If you decide to dress up in certain clothes, you can be considered casteist. Now, somebody may say, what nonsense? What nonsense are you talking about? No, this is actually true, because in November of 2021, the Other Collective, which is a registered student organization at UC Davis, sent out a note saying that boycott Diwali, because Diwali is a casteist and violent festival. By celebrating Diwali, you are endorsing violence against Muslims, Dalits, Adivasis, Sikhs, and other communities. Okay, and then the fact that the deities, Hindu deities, are Brahmanical and therefore casteist. I am not making this up. For people who think I'm joking, I'm more than happy to share resources. It's available online, and the university did not take any steps. So these groups will be out there with impunity against Hindu students, and Hindu students will not be able to express their civil rights and their religious freedom openly without being considered caste supremacist or casteist. Okay, so this is the danger. Now, let me say, if you are a faculty member or if you are a worker what happens to you? All of a sudden, you have a student who has an axe to grind with you. You give a bad grade to a student. The student, how do you know? Student's a Patel or a Kumar, like I said, right? How do you know that person's caste? You don't care, but you give them a bad grade. The student turns around and basically files a complaint against you, saying that you, Mr. Iyer or Mr. Krishnamurthy or Mr. Trivedi or whatever last names you have, you are an upper caste and you discriminated me because I'm a lower caste. It doesn't matter. The university can do an investigation and find no problem whatsoever. But like what happened in the Cisco case, and I'll talk about the Cisco case in a second, but like what happened in the Cisco case, you don't have to prove innocence or guilt. You're already guilty. So the media is going to basically make a whole stink out of the fact that a professor so-and-so was accused of being casteist at this university or that university in California. So the professor's entire reputation is tarnished. And that's what's going on in the Cisco case. The Cisco case has not even been proven yet. The court is out right now. It's sub judice. The court, it's going to be 2 years since the case was filed in summer of 2020, in a few months. Still, there is no verdict. But the media has caricaturized both of those people, Sundar Iyer and Romana Campella, as guilty. And their reputation has been tarnished. Even though the guy who sued them, the so-called Dalit person who sued them, was a batchmate of theirs. Okay, so if that person went to IIT and if that person worked in the same area, and so they should have already known before even hiring him, right? So there are so many different things, and the fact that he was given sort of like additional preferential treatment. There's many things, and Cisco itself has been going down this investigation. But the point is, I can go on the technical details. The point I'm trying to make is that just like the Cisco case has been basically proven that, oh, this is actually true, because where there's smoke, there's fire in that sense. The same thing can happen to a faculty member. The same thing can happen to a student on campus. So all of these things are connected. And by the way, they have also used the Cisco case as an argument to be made, even though that case is not proven yet.
Now, here's my big concern, Nikunj. I'm a resident of California, and I, in my opinion, pay a lot of taxes. Now, first of all, the CalState system will be using taxpayer money to come up with whatever method. So I see a drain or a misuse of my money. On top of that, if there is a problem, if somebody sues CalState, guess whose money it's going to use to defend itself? My money.
Yes.
First of all, I'm telling you guys, you're making a huge mistake in doing this. You have not even thought this thing through. And then why are you wasting my money?
It's
so
both ways.
I'm really boiling at this point, sir.
Yes, it's both ways. See, they're going to use taxpayer money, which is your money, to pass a policy that's going to impact you. And then when someone sues them, they're going to use taxpayer money, which is your money, to defend themselves. Right? So it's both ways. You're screwed both ways. So unfortunately, this is what. But I also want to talk to the Indian students in India. Okay, if you're an Indian student in India, I want you to listen to this very carefully. You are going to be one of the biggest targets, because when you show up here, you are coming from basically some background. Let's say you might be Dalit, you might be upper caste, whatever different categories are. But when you show up here, you're going to be looked at through the lens of caste. And when you are trying to do certain things on campuses, you may be accused of being casteist. And again, they have also mentioned that a lot of this problem comes from India, right? Indian people, Hindus from India export this problem. So who are the Hindus from India is the international students. So I would caution, if you are coming to California, if you are a student who's thinking, I want to go to California to study, I want you to think hard. If you are a parent of a student, international student, I want you to think hard that do you want to send your child to a university in California where he or she may be discriminated against just because of his or her last name, family background, or religion? That is a violation of civil rights, the freedom to practice your religion freely and to receive equal protection under law.
You have hit the nail on the head here. And when a student arrives from India, there's a huge cultural adjust that takes place. And many things that they wouldn't think twice about in India, suddenly they'll have to look over their shoulder. What are they going to look at? Trying to adjust to a new society, different pace of education, and different environment. And now on top of all this, that you need to be careful about who you talk to, what you do, what you celebrate, what you wear, what you eat. Oh my God, I can't stop here. So this, I think they are actually shooting themselves in the foot. The reason I say that is campuses like San Jose State. You want to take a guess on how much is Indian enrollment, Indian people from India enrolling in? Take a guess, Nikunj.
I don't know, 20%?
90.
Wow. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying.
It's filled with people from India. San Jose State is going to have a huge enrollment problem. If people start watching this video, and I'm sure people all over the world are going to watch it, their number one source of students is from India.
And that's what unfortunately, money talks, right? No matter how many protests you do and stuff like that, until it hits somebody economically, they're not going to listen to you. So I'm not a student. I'm not from India. I'm not an Indian citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen and stuff like that. But it's really up to Indian parents. Do they want to send their kid 4,000, 5,000 miles away only to be subjected to hate and discrimination in California? Because that is really what's happening. 23 universities within the system have passed this. Okay, and then as you said, there are a few off campus as well. So a total of 30 different institutional bodies have passed this. And if you look at some of the language that they have used, right, when defending this stuff, right, they have said that we are ready to fight this in the law in the court. Okay, so they are very adamant that this policy is the right thing that they have done, without consulting Hindus or without doing due diligence. Any of this. This doesn't happen to any other community, and this reminds me of the colonization. The same kind of idea that the British used about caste. They had no damn clue about caste. They introduced a word that was foreign, and then they devised policies around it. It's the same recolonization of Hindus that's really happening in California, right? So once again, after, I don't know, 100 years, close to 100 years, Hindus are being discriminated again in California. They were kicked out once from Washington and California about 100 years ago. Now they are being forced to question their identity. Think about the amount of students that come from India, but think about the amount of Hindus that are in Silicon Valley. Okay, the Indian Americans that are in Silicon Valley, whether they are U.S. citizens or not, it doesn't matter, right? And their kids, I know people very personally in the Bay Area whose kids are in California, and they are livid with this kind of treatment that is happening to the community. Unfortunately, you cannot just trigger that on some WhatsApp, right? You cannot just be ranting on WhatsApp. You need to get out and get to the universities, get to your lawmakers, and really raise hell. Because otherwise, nothing's going to happen. Because if you don't, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? If you keep your mouth shut, you're going to be in trouble. And your kids, more importantly, forget about you because you are not in the university. Your kids are going to be in trouble because they are going to be subject to scrutiny all the time. If they say anything about Kashmir, for example, okay, they will be considered casteist, upper caste, Hindutva supremacist. These are the words that are used. If they say anything about the genocide of Hindus in Bangladesh, which is obviously very, very well documented, they would be considered Islamophobic and casteist because only apparently upper caste Hindus are raising voices. This entire thing will be wrapped in such a caste of sort of Hindu-phobic way that students won't be very comfortable expressing the Hindu identity. So I'm going to read to you an excerpt from the letter that was sent by the students, okay? And I want all the parents to think about put yourself or put your kid in these shoes. This is what they said. Passing this policy will put me in a mental state where I will feel terrorized to speak about who I am as a Hindu, fearing that people will stereotype me or target me simply due to my last name, my family, or my Hindu background. I will feel uncomfortable wearing cultural outfits, conducting religious rituals, catering vegetarian food, or even simply holding a discussion on our religious and practices and philosophy due to fear of being labeled as a caste oppressor. Okay, as a caste oppressor, this is what is in the minds of these Hindu students. So it's really important what's going on in them. These are the students that are brave enough to work with us to send the letters, emails to the universities. But there are many others who are silently just watching this or feeling a little bit inhibited to speak out because they're concerned they'll be targeted by these types of groups who have made a business out of hating Hindus. So this is what it is. And I don't mince any words because for me personally, I can tell you, if I had to put my daughter in these shoes, I would be livid that this is going on and my daughter is going to show up at a university where just because she has a last name like Trivedi, she will be considered casteist, her ancestors will be considered casteist without even an iota of information about who we are as people, and inhibiting my daughter's religious rights or my daughter's civil rights to practice her religion freely. That's what my biggest concern would be if I was a parent right now in the university.
Thank you very much, Nikunj. And I hope saner minds prevail and this is pulled off of this list. It's nothing but bad news. And I'm again, if this ever comes to a court case, who knows? Somebody might present this as evidence saying that some people told you before itself that you are running into a big landmine here, tread carefully. And they chose to not do that. Who knows? There could be more punitive damages because of that. I'm just trying to be very cautious here. Caste was never an issue for students, parents who came here, people who came from India. They came here because they sought a meritorious place where they could succeed by their hard work and their effort and their intelligence. Thank you very much, Nikunj. And we'll be back again to talk about this. This is just the beginning. There are lots of things happening around caste, around Islamophobia, a lot of fake narratives on which these card houses are built. So we'll keep you posted. Thank you very much. Please do share, subscribe, and like our channel and click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.
Namaste. Thank you again.